Brad, in January, I turned 50, big 5-0, not a young spring chicken anymore. And in advance of that, I decided, you know what, I'm going to be proactive. I'm going to get a bunch of medical stuff checked out. I'm going to get my skin checked out because I got a history of skin cancer in the family. I'm going to get my heart checked out with a CT scan. I'm going to get the colonoscopy. I'm going to get all that stuff done. And so last night, UCLA scheduled my CT scan for my heart at 10 p.m. at night. Because apparently this multi-million-dollar Siemens machine is worth so much money that they just run it 21 hours a day. And so it's cheaper to just have technicians working on it. Anyway, long story short, I go in at 10 p.m. at night, and I'm all dressed up because I'm coming from the National Cartoonist Society has a holiday party every year, and it's 40 or 50 cartoonists getting together, and that's always lovely. And so I'm kind of dressed up, and I'm like, oh, let me go change. And the guy goes, what are you coming from? And I go, oh, a cartoonist gathering. He goes, oh, you're an animator. And I go, no, I'm not an animator. I'm a cartoonist. And as I'm explaining that, I'm getting into the Siemens machine. It's this big donut-shaped thing, right? Yeah. And it has this gigantic LCD screen, like right in front of your face, that shows your heartbeat, or your heart rate, rather. So it's like 69, 72, 73, 71. Every heartbeat, it's adjusting with your heartbeat. Right. And so he goes, oh, you're a cartoonist. What do you do? And I go, oh, I share my cartoons on the internet and then sell books and do that sort of stuff. And I get the standard, so you can make a living out of that. And Brad, because my heart rate is right in front of my face, I see it go beep, 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 beep.
Almost like Curly going, whoop, 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 whoop.
Yeah, I was like, my heart was betraying me. I was like, oh, all right, heart, we're 50 years old now. This shouldn't get to us like this anymore. Beep, 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 beep.
Oh my God, that's almost too perfect.
I know. So I was like, well, I guess this is what I get for checking out my heart, is that I get abuse on what I do. And on that, everybody, I'm going to say hello and welcome to ComicLab, the show about increasingly high heart rates and making comics.
And making a living from comics. Beep, 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 beep. I'm Brad Guigar, editor of WebcomicsHandbook and the cartoonist of Evil Inc.
And I'm his pal, Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of Stripped.
And this week's hour of heart-stopping comics advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. And just for fun's sake, I want to tell you, this is the weird world we live in. Like a CT would not have been possible for a heart like before computer control. Because what the computer does is it times how it slides your tray back and forth to your heartbeat, so that it's taking sliced photos of your heart when it's at rest, during that microsecond when it's at rest. So it moves quarter inch every time your heart beats, or rather lack of beats. And there's no way a human, can you imagine trying to do it 30 years ago? Some guy holding on to the end of your tray, sliding you back and forth every time with a heartbeat.
Well, not only that, but when that guy asked you if you could make a living in comics, did that mean that it started shaking you back and forth violently?
No, we hadn't started the process yet, but you got sort of the leads that feed in your heartbeat into the machine. But anyway, I just thought that was fascinating that the computer can, it's taking X-ray slides of your heart, but it does it as the beat is in recession, or the interregnum between. I never remember systolic and diastolic. Anyway, fascinating computer control. Anyway, this has been Dave Kellett Experiences the World, everybody. Thanks for joining me.
How did we get into heart terminology here? Oh my God.
I don't know. Anyway, today we have a really fun show for everybody, especially as I go into my 50th year, because we are going to do our predictions and goals for 2024. And Brad and I are excited for this one because this is always a fun one. It's sort of our blue sky, hey, here's the ideal world we could create in 2024 if everything clicks and if everything hits. But much like the person putting the leads on my heart, sometimes there's going to be some things that raises our heartbeat, Brad. So let's jump right into it. What are your predictions for 2024, Brad?
Well, this may be a bit of I don't know whether this is a cheat or a cop-out, but I'm going to take a push on my prediction for Twitter from last year. I'm going to just reapply the same prediction. I'm shocked and amazed that they made it all the way to the end of the year. I thought for sure that he was going to crumble. Watching that, two things that happened just recently. one of which was Elon Musk blaming a lot of the advertisers for pulling out and attributing personal malice towards it. And the other was that interview, that super awkward interview he gave, in which he supposedly forgot one of his best friend's names and also just basically literally told his advertisers or potential advertisers that they could go F themselves. And those are not the business practices of a successful business person.
No.
That's somebody who's circling the bowl and knows it. And I think the bills are going to come due in 2024, and either he's just going to run it into the ground irreparably, and it'll turn into a MySpace situation, or someone more likely is going to take it over. They'll buy it for, half valuation and try to build back what it was before Elon Musk really approved what a terrible business person he is and ran it into the ground in 2023. So I'm going to take it. I'm going to take a push on Twitter. It didn't happen last year, but God, it's got to happen this year.
It's got to happen. And you know what? I'm as surprised as you, Brad, that it didn't happen this year, but I will co-sign your push into 2024 that's going to go belly up in some way, shape, or form with him at the helm. Yeah. And I will say that for me, a related 2024 prediction that I'm going to say is that I personally feel like we are going to continue a fragmented, no winner takes all social media landscape into 2024. Mm-hmm. I genuinely thought that if Threads couldn't have won the game in 2023, after that big push, then I don't know that we're going to see a consolidation in 2024. Yeah. Blue Sky, Threads, Mastodon, Twitter, they're all still in the game in a really fragmented way in the sense that none of them are really doing gangbusters. TikTok is eating everyone's lunch. Of course, TikTok, not that great for web cartoonists, so it doesn't really apply to what we do.
No.
So for the static social media platforms, I think we're still in a same game, post on 6 different platforms 2024. How about you?
Interesting. I actually have a prediction on social media that goes slightly askew of that.
Okay.
I've been talking about how the fact that Threads didn't immediately replace Twitter, or even not so immediately hasn't replaced Twitter in the interim, is an indication that as a community, we are all over social media. We're not, my theory is that we're not looking for the next social media anymore because we've gotten it several times now. And we got it, looked at it and said, we don't want it. We just don't want this. And my prediction is nebulous, but the way I'm going to parse it is that we're going to start to see a really significant pivot from users away from social media in general, just away from. In other words, we're going to start to find other uses for our smartphones than social media, whether it's reading books or listening to audiobooks or watching movies or watching streaming services. We're going to interact a little bit less as a result. And you know what? Maybe that's a good thing. But I think we're going to start to see a real pivot away from social media in terms of what that means for people like us. We'd all love to see RSS come back, and I still hold out hope that something like that happens because that was good for people like us. I don't have a solid prediction there, but my prediction is that we're going to see all of the social media sites see a really pronounced decrease in traffic. And that means that we've all moved on and started to try to find other things to do with our time.
That's interesting. I both do and don't co-sign on to that. But I will say, Brad, you and I are both of an age where this might mean something for people of similar ages, which is, if you remember stand-up comedy around the fax machine and stand-up comedy around the cable guy and trying to make an appointment with a cable guy, there are times in society when you can tell that society is waiting for the next technological leap, even though you don't know what it is yet. And for us, it was stand-up comedy. Like everybody in our young days would joke around about how shitty a fax machine was as a communication technology. And everybody would joke around about trying to make cable work. There was like a 10-year window there where you could not make an appointment with a cable guy that didn't go from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. because they just had a monopoly and they didn't care. And so people were waiting for it, but we didn't know what came next. And it took a decade or two until streaming came along or until email came along to replace fax. And so I share your mood that I feel like we're in that stage with social media where people know they want something else. But no one has the wherewithal or knowledge of what's coming next to replace that thing that we all hate. So yes, there's still some life in social media. Yes, we should continue to still work that angle in among multiple platforms. But I do share Brad's sense overall that people are kind of tired of it, broadly speaking, you know? So, and
it's just harder. It's harder to get people to engage, number one, because obviously the algorithm is working against you, but also because we're tired of the conversation in general. And we're tired as people who produce content. We're tired of doing this to earn our daily bread. And the people that we're talking to are kind of tired of it because they've heard the same old come-ons. They've heard the same engagement farming. They've heard the clickbait headlines. They've seen and heard, and this next generation coming up is so savvy to it. Even one much more than we were, obviously. But the next generation coming up sees this stuff walking up Broad Street and shrugs it off. So all of which leads to a kind of malaise, a kind of boredom on social media, a real low heartbeat, not much engagement. And by the way, that and we're this is going to be a little bit of a theme for today's show. That's bad things for us because social media is how we made crowdfunding work, both Kickstarter for merchandise-related crowdfunding and Patreon, ongoing funding for our work. Social media made that happen. We're going to have to start seriously, and this goes into not necessarily a goal, but not a prediction, but a goal we'll talk about later on in the show. That's going to be one of my goals. I keep using the words wrong. It's going to be something I work on for next year, is replacing social media in my outreach, because I've gotten to the point where I can see very clearly in my analytics it just isn't delivering anymore. And we're going to have to stop talking about coming up with new ways. And 2024 is when we're going to have to start implementing them. Right.
Well, okay, speaking of diminishing returns, I want to talk about a potential prediction, if not in the next 12 months, in the next 24 months. And that's going to be for Patreon. I very much see the writing on the wall that we're leaning into, or heading into rather, an IPO for Patreon stock. And in the run up to an IPO, all sorts of things try to get juiced, sort of make the numbers look amazing for the market, right? You want that IPO to launch with an incredible valuation. So I do think, and this is a low key prediction, it's not that Patreon's going to necessarily diminish what we can get out of it over the next 12 to 24 months. But I think just on our radar, you have to be ready for the fact that we might see a tiny enshittification of Patreon for the purposes of juicing that valuation, like we saw with the free membership thing. So in the same way that free members don't necessarily hurt you, quote unquote, although I think they kind of do. But you'll start to see Patreon making decisions with the goal towards the IPO, not with the goal towards helping artists per se. Does that make sense, Brad? Does that track for you?
Absolutely. Perfect sense. And here is where we need to really make sure that we communicate, because you and I have the same mind on this. It's not a reason to panic. Right? This is, and especially for my fellow not safe for work creators, all of whom are saying, well, if the IPO comes out, it's very likely that Patreon cuts not safe for work. That is definitely a possibility. Now, you got to remember, OnlyFans tried that and they got walloped. as a result. So
Right.
Patreon may be looking at that and trying to think of another way to do that. And you cannot dismiss Patreon's commitment to not safe for work. It would for years. There was several points at which it would have been much easier and cheaper for them to cut us loose. So they might decide to find a way to keep us on. But it is a time for all of us, not in a panicky way, not in lighting the house on fire and running outside.
Yeah.
But this is a time to start keeping your ear to the ground, start making plans to see what would happen. This is the time for all of us, particularly people that are doing my kind of comics, to ask yourself this question: if I had to leave Patreon tomorrow, what would I do? And not only what would I do, blue sky, but what would I do and what would it take to implement that step by step and to start putting that plan together in your head and start getting a couple of those first two items nailed down so that if it happens, and I'm not saying it's going to happen, I'm not even going to say this is probably going to happen, but if it happens, that you can pivot your own business and come through ahead. In other words, this is not the year to be caught flat-footed. We've had lots of rumblings, lots of indications that this is something that might be on the horizon. Maybe it never happens. If so, fine. You're not out anything.
Right.
And again, this is not the time to make slap shot decisions and to tear everything up and go start building on another platform. I don't think that's smart. But this is the time to start thinking about what you would do and how you would implement that, and to start putting those plans into formal words for yourself.
Yeah. And I don't want to overly belabor the point, but I personally feel like we have about 2 or 3 years before there's some kind of drastic change with Patreon.
Yeah.
And so I think for the most part, we're safe-ish for right now, but I do agree with Brad. It is always worth it to have the planning ready to go. And so, Brad, what's your next prediction for 2024?
Yeah, this is my last prediction for the year. And that is, I was looking back at our prediction last year, and one of them was about Kickstarter and blockchain. And you'll notice for the most part, there's been a couple things happening. First of all, a lot of people smelled blood in the water and came after Kickstarter.
Yeah.
BackerKit, which is a company I like an awful lot and use a lot. BackerKit came after them. Topatico came after them. A lot of other low-level crowdfunders came after them to try to steal some of their business placement.
Right.
From my perspective, my sense is they have not been very successful. And that's just from my vantage point. That's my judgment that they haven't been successful. And I think part of the reason for that is, number one, Kickstarter is just the 800-pound gorilla. They're the undisputed leader in that sector. But also because you'll notice they haven't been saying a whole lot about blockchain ever since somebody got in touch with that CEO and said, "Dummy up. You're not even going to say that word in public anymore." And I think by just letting that whole thing die and going back to business as usual, they have maintained their business placement. And that's my prediction for 2023, is that they're going to maintain their business, the being on top of this type of crowdfunding just by keeping their mouth shut and staying under the radar and not making waves. This is no time for them to do that. And I think if we were going to see a replacement for Kickstarter, it would have happened this year. I think a lot of people took a shot, and I think Kickstarter is still on top.
Yeah, I will co-sign this prediction as well, that I think 2024 for Kickstarter is a keep on keeping on kind of a year.
Yep.
No big changes. And in general, as Brad said, with their blockchain, going quiet about blockchain, I have to say that for me, seeing crypto fall apart as an investment opportunity, one of the great bonuses of all of that is that we just don't have to hear about crypto bros talking online anymore. All of that just took up the internet for like 3-4 years there, where you heard about deals, you heard about the worst people possible online just making millions. You're like, I hate all of this. And it's all gone for right now. And I love it. I love it. It's like a storm has cleared and the skies are blue again.
It is nice that one of the significant things about 2023 is we did not have a single show where NFTs were important enough for us to talk about.
All of that nonsense is gone.
An issue.
It was all vapor money, It was like NFTs, crypto, all that weird stuff. I love it. I love that it's all gone. And some people are going to jail for it, which is great. So even better. So I will say my last prediction for 2024, this will impact everyone that goes to San Diego Comic-Con. 2023 was surprisingly a immensely breakout year for the show for almost everyone I've spoken to, by the way. Having mentioned that I went to the cartoonist event last night, we were talking about how everybody just had gangbuster years at 2023 because with both actors and movies and television productions out of the picture for San Diego Comic-Con, no one paid for autographs. No one went up to Hall H. No one did any of the Hollywood-related events at San Diego Comic-Con that normally pulls people off the floor. So everybody spent about 10 to 15% more than they normally do on comics. And so we all did gangbusters. And so my prediction for 2024 is that it's going to be a little bit of a hard come down for some artists who do not plan for that. That 2024 is going to be a reverting to norm. And for no fault of their own, their sales will go down from the previous year, perhaps still up from 2022, but down from 2023. And so I think that's something we all have to prepare for, myself included, that it's going to be a little bit of a emotionally rough come down and financially rough come down from a high year.
Yeah, it's almost going to be like a game of musical chairs. It's going to be very interesting to walk the show floor and see who bet big on Comic-Con being, the same as last year. And lost their shirt, and you'll be able to see, you'll be able to see it real easy, who's still standing when the music stops. But then again, I'll be the first to admit I was wrong about my Comic-Con prediction last year. I thought for sure that it was going to be a bust, and it wasn't. Let me ask you this, Dave, about your prediction. Do you harbor the slightest possibility, like over 10% possibility, that last year, 2023, reignited something in the hearts of comics fans, and they're going to come back having had a great experience not going to Hall H and rediscovering comics, that they're going to come back with a new, renewed vigor and zeal, and it's actually going to surprise everybody by being just as good as it was last year?
10% is a pretty low bar in terms of predictability. I mean, yes, there's a tiny part, and I'll tell you why. I will tell you why. Yeah. Autographs, signed autographs, paid for signed autographs will obviously be available in 2024, and that will suck up a lot of cash. But the dirty little secret from Hollywood is that 2024, there's not a lot of stuff in the pipeline that's going to be coming out this year.
Interesting.
If my wife's career is any indication, because aside from Dune and a few other movies, Dune Part 2, there's not a lot that was near finished editing before the strike. So some of this stuff takes a while to gear up. You know what I mean? Some of these bigger movies, especially sci-fi movies that fellow nerds like. So if you're imagining the stereotypical guy that's walking Comic-Con, he's got a churro on one hand and he's got an Iron Man shirt on and he's going, I like comics. And he's walking around, I don't know why it's that voice, but he's walking around. I can see him spending a little money upstairs with the Hollywood stuff, but there's a 10% chance we could have a better than normal Comic-Con this year just because there's not a lot of stuff pulling their attention. I'd forgotten about the second Dune movie coming out this year. That's something I hadn't even had on my... Well, I know Dune is a huge part of your life, Brad. If there's one book that Brad celebrates, what did you say it was? I'm done with the sand when I had you read it? What did you say?
Well, that was actually going to be my punchline. I was going to ask you what the subtitle for part 2 was. It's still hot out.
Can I tell you from a writing perspective, one thing that I was thinking about with Dune the other day, and because you know how the handshake got started because it's a way of saying, I don't have a sword in this hand, so let's shake hands. And clinking glasses is a way of saying, I haven't poisoned your cup, so let's spill them back and forth into each other.
Okay.
Dune, one of the coolest things that Dune had was the characters would pick up sand and throw it in the air as a way of saying, you're not my enemy, the sand is my enemy, and the sand is your enemy too, so let's be friends.
Right.
And I always thought from a writer's perspective, how clever that is. I don't know where that's coming from. It's appropriate of nothing, but I just thought it's a fun little writerly thing to note as we go.
And also, if you're throwing sand in the air that you're not facing an enemy because you're going to be spending so much time wiping the sand out of your face that he's going to be able to come right at you with his sword.
Yeah, you can't really attack when you're doing this. Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on ComicLab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics. All right, well, this is the fun section of the show for Brad and I. This is going to be our 2024 personal goals, professional goals for our own individual careers. And a lot of people really like this because I think it helps them spur on their own goals, their own things, My wife asked me this morning, what are you going to do today for the show? And I said, we're doing our predictions and goals. She goes, I love that show. I love when you do that. And I'm like, really? But she's a planner. She loves planning kind of stuff. I'm not a planner. I'm not. That is not my forte. But she goes, no, I really love that show. So I know my wife is going to be listening very closely to today's show. So I got to behave myself. And we do have a few listeners that hold us to account on it, which I don't mind. I don't mind the public accountability of holding our feet to the fire with our goals. So let's dive right into it. And I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, speak for yourself. If I don't meet one of my goals, I want to kindly invite you all to mind your own business. I want you all to practice our indoor voices and stop talking. Yeah. So, all right, well, let's jump into it. So my first goal for the year is all Kickstarter focused. I've got 3 books planned for the next 18 months. And so the 2 that will fall into 2024, I'm going to do an all-color, all-new Sheldon collection that focuses on my bird Pickles. So that's going to be launching in January, February of 2024. I've got Drive Book 4, which will be launching in June of 2024. And that's always a big, big endeavor. The Drive books it's a lot, but it's worth it financially because it helps pay for the next 3 years. So it's worth it. And then this is jumping the gun, but in 2025, the January of 2025, I'm going to be kickstarting an Anatomy of Dogs book. So that's my next 18 months of Kickstarter is those 3 books. So I'm very excited for it because the Pickles book, Beth has been working nonstop on it, and it is darn near put to bed and ready to kickstart. And by the way, that's something we always recommend is get the work done before you kickstart the book. We've had too many friends that fell into that trap where they kickstart it and then spend the next 3 years trying to finish the book. So I'm excited to get that going. And so Kickstarter, a big part of my 2024. Okay, well, listen, I'll keep the ball rolling because Kickstarter is also going to be factoring very strongly into next year. Like I said earlier on the show, I really got derailed with a summer full of personal appearances and speaking appearances and stuff, and not only for the show, a lot of winning of awards, and a lot of showing up so I could be lauded. Yeah. And also like family travel came up in the summer, and I've got a son that's making college decisions, so there was just a lot of stuff. Yeah. So I pushed my Kickstarter back to the first quarter. And it's going to be something that I'm really kind of excited to see how it goes. It'll be the next Evil Inc. book, but it's also going to be, there'll be a second book
that incorporates the After Dark parts into the Evil Inc. storyline. Around about this time in my storyline, I started getting much better about developing a balance between Evil Inc. and Evil Inc. After Dark. So I'll actually be able to put a book out that you can read it completely safe for work with no bumps, no question marks left in the plot line. And there'll be a second book where it'll hand off and incorporate those After Dark parts, and it'll also be a complete seamless reading experience. So I'm super excited to see how that turns out. And of course, I'm not going to try to put a calendar in there because that, number one, it'll be the first quarter and it'll be either too late or too early, depending on how you slice it. Although I guess it'll be coming out later. No, forget about it. No calendar. That I'm still sour about what happened with that calendar. So I'm not going to do a calendar. But I'm just going to focus on that. And then if I can get back in the saddle and get momentum going, I'm planning on a second Kickstarter, either Q2 or Q3. And I haven't decided yet. What I really need to do is sit down and get the second edition of Webcomics Handbook out. I really need to do that. The problem is that's the one that takes the most work.
It's a lot of work,
And the chances of my getting time to do that are almost none. So, but it's on the list. It's something I need to do. Just a straight up After Dark book or another. I was surprised at how well the art book did. Just basically a collection of single illustrations and commissions. That really did way better than I thought it ever would do. So that's on the possibility.
You know, it's something, Brad, we should talk about this just for a brief second, is that you and I, for the most part, have avoided what for a lot of illustrators is a big income source, which is just the art book or, the source book of art. And so to hear you talk about that, that's a fun possibility for you to dip a toe into those waters. Yeah,
the first one that I did so well, I'd be kind of missing the boat not to do a second one. Yeah. So it's also on the list. And also, like we keep talking about, all of those single panel illustrations that I did for Patreon backers, some of which are safe for work, some of which are not safe for work. I actually put this together and there's almost an even split. And part of me, although I'm super scared of doing it, wants to do one of those books where you can read it from either side by turning it upside down. You know that?
Yeah.
So you read it from front to back and it's safe for work. And then you flip it over and you read it from front to back and it's not safe for work. And of course, in the middle, the pages flip. You can't keep going. I don't know whether there's value in doing that, but it's something that I blue skied when I was thinking about that. So it's a possibility that I do a collection of bonus cartoons. I can tell by your face you hate that idea.
I was.
You can't fool me. You hate that idea.
We don't need to discuss it on the show per se, but I don't know that I might just say that a thing that I've learned from trying to teach children about food is I think I might just say that's not to my taste. And say I don't need to give you my opinion. Just say that's not to my taste.
So would you just mix the safe for work and not safe for work?
Well, I don't know. I mean, this is so out of my wheelhouse that I don't know how I would handle it. But are you, when you say you would, so would pages 1 through 50 be read upright, and then pages 51 through 100 would be upside down and backwards? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, because I was seeing the book as every right-facing page, no matter how you were holding the book, would always be for a continuous story. And so you flip it over, and then the right-facing page for that direction is now the story. I see. Either way it could work, but I'll just be honest as a friend. I don't know that I love that idea.
Yeah. It might be easier just to have a safe for work section and a not safe for work section, or just to scramble them all up and say, deal with it.
Well, I liked your idea. I mean, if you're going to do in for a penny, in for a pound, if you're going to do the NSFW version, mix it into the plot that it was meant to be worked into, right? Didn't you write it so that they jump back and forth?
The bonus cartoons have no plot. They're single panel cartoons.
These
They're
are the
single
bonus
panels.
ones. I'm so sorry. That's my listening skills. I'm sorry. So yes. Well, I mean, on some level, go with God. I've never seen it done before. If you want to try, listen to me. What great friend advice. I mean, if you want to try it, it's your funeral. Good job, Brad.
And to be honest with you, I saw it done once and did not like it.
Yeah, I was going to say, it feels unsatisfying.
I got a copy of a book in my hand, and that was the concept, and I did not like it. But it still is something that I thought, well, this would be one of those applications.
I mean, I feel like I have no way of quantifyingly saying this other than to say a book that tells you to flip itself over to read the other direction feels like, I don't know, I can't say this right, but it feels like shifting sand. Like it's like, well, which way is up? Which way? I don't know. There's something unstable about it that my mind doesn't react well to. And that's not helpful advice. That doesn't give you anything to work with, but that's just my initial reaction. I'm just being honest about it.
Yeah. And something that always goes through my mind as a not safe for work creator is that if it happens to be lying on a table, safe for work side up, and somebody picks it up and gets something that they weren't expecting, that's not cool either. So it might be better just to brand it, hey, this is not safe for work, and sprinkle in the safe for work stuff in there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And also, I just feel like upside down somewhere, there's going to be a production nightmare in terms of something that went wrong with either the printer trying to quote unquote fix your error, or you know.
Huge risk.
Anyway. All right, well, let's jump in. My other goal for 2024 is going to be, obviously, doing San Diego Comic-Con again, especially because I paid for that booth. So doing San Diego Comic-Con again. Actually, I haven't asked you. Do you think you'll be joining me for Comic-Con for 2024?
You'll have to wait to hear my personal goal for that.
Titter on this side of the microphone. Yeah. I don't know whether we'll be seeing Brad Guigar. So we'll see.
If we get a live show, you won't be able to stop me. I'll be booking a flight down there.
Then I will be. I'm emailing the folks in San Diego today and saying, hey, let's get a ComicLab live show. Actually, no, I can't till March. Okay, San Diego Comic-Con July as always. My goal is to prepare myself mentally for a 5 to 15% sales drop from last year, which would still be great. Let's just be honest about it. It would still be great. I would be very happy with it. The way that I am preparing for it is there's two things on my radar. And there's actually an upcoming reader question, or listener question rather, that we have to answer that said, hey, Dave, how did you get that income at San Diego Comic-Con? Can you take us through it? And I'll flip over some of the cards right now to just say that I have 2 books that are immensely giftable. And so people buy them out of guilt for going to Comic-Con, if you know what I mean. Like, oh, my coworker Greg couldn't make it, so I'm bringing him a gift. Oh, my cousin Susie couldn't make it, so I'm bringing her a gift. And if you provide a book that serves 2 purposes, it goes to fans and it's giftable, those sell like hotcakes at San Diego. And so my Pug book has been that for years, right? And so 2024 is going to be a test ground of whether my new Dinosaurs book, which did really, really well in 2023, will continue to do well in year 2 of its existence as a new perennial, if that makes sense.
Right.
A new, ever selling book, evergreen book. So that's going to be a big test for me in this coming year, is whether I now have 2 perennial books, which would be bonkers great for my business if that's the case. And it's part of the reason why I'm doing Anatomy of Dogs in 2025. And then also for 2024, for Comic-Con, I'm going to be doing a new strategy, which worked great last year, which was to have 5 new pins debut at the show. Why do that? Because there's a lot of foot traffic when there's the new stuff, right? People always pick up something, which then cracks the wallet. It's like the loss leader that gets them spending. It's a low cost of goods sold, usually between $2 and $3 to produce a pin. So you're not breaking the bank to produce 5 new pins. And they're a huge margin. If you do it right, you can get 5 times cost on a pin, and it is a great seller and easy to pack. God, that's a big thing. It is easy to pack. It weighs very little and represents hundreds, if not thousands of dollars per pin. So that'll be my big 2024 goal for Comic-Con.
Wow, that's cool. Well, okay, well, that dovetails right into my goals, and that is personal appearances for 2024. Something that I really, honest to goodness, would not have considered a goal 2 or 3 years ago. Well, certainly not during COVID, but even before that, I had kind of I'd gotten to a point where I had completely written off comic conventions as a business venture, and still do, by the way. I think that for most of us, comic conventions are a bad decision. But I've kind of replaced that with personal appearances, and that's my goal.
And just winning awards, personal appearances / winning awards.
And also just showing up to be lauded.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
Of course. But my goals are to do a live show with you in San Diego. I'd love to do another live show for the NCS. That was a fantastic experience. Yeah. Especially, we'll be going to somewhere on the West Coast, so there's a lot of possibilities there. And also, something as we're recording today, Drunker ComicLab just hit everybody's podcatchers, and we talk about Road Trip 2024.
Yes.
And
yes.
I think the possibility of you and I doing a coast-to-coast trip this summer, as we discussed in that exclusive show, you can become a Patreon backer and listen to it if you want to hear all the details. But we've gotten on the phone a couple times and talked about it, and talked about some of the places we might hit and incorporate live shows and personal appearances into those. And if we do that, if we manage to pull that off, I think that would be a huge highlight of the year.
It's funny. Okay, so that is actually my next goal for 2024. And this is, like Brad said, it's coming with incredible excitement. I'm personally calling it ComicLab Across America. I'm tentatively planning it for August 2024 with the caveat that this is a bigger deal than just at first blush. So it might take Brad and I 18 months or so to plan this, because as it grows in my heart, I'm now thinking I would love to do more public speaking engagements, which would require me timing this out with Ohio State, the Schultz Museum, colleges along probably Route 80, I-80 across the northern U.S. So I think the way we would do it is, I think we would start at Philadelphia, go to New York, take the I-80 across, maybe stop at Columbus, maybe stop at South Bend, give a talk at my own old university there, maybe go to Salt Lake, San Francisco, and then down to LA. I think that's where we would go.
Yeah.
And I think if we do it right, we could schedule pretty much a talk a night, which would be so fun. And a talk a night / signing, that'd be so fun to do, Brad. But it's not easy to schedule that,
No. And I think it's going to end up taking us more time than we're expecting it to take.
Yes.
Like this might end up growing beyond what we originally talked about, but it's definitely something that is doable.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And the good thing about it is that every passing year, it gets a little bit easier for you to do. Like you said, let's say we don't do it this year. It's an 18-month thing. Next year, it's going to be even easier, because as your kids get older, it's going to be easier for you to be gone for a longer period of time.
Right.
And my kids, they're not even kids anymore, so I don't have to worry about it quite as much. I can be gone. Carolyn's more than happy to have me out of the house.
That's how you know a happy marriage is when a wife is like, get out of here for 10 days.
Get out of here. Yeah.
So I'll put this out there. If you are at the Center for Cartoon Studies, hey, Tilly, if you're listening, Brad and I, you don't have to pay for travel. We'll just happily give a talk. If Jenny or Caitlin at Ohio State's Cartoon Art Library, if you'd like Brad and I to do a public comic lab, Jeannie over at the Schultz Museum, if you'd like us to come back, we're happy to do that. The Cartoon Art Museum, if you guys would like us in San Francisco, we're happy to give a talk there. I think this would be a really, really fun thing to do ComicLab Across America. And I also have this as a goal for 2024.
And just comic shops across that I-80 zone of the United States, because we're going to need a few in the middle there. We kind of hop from
we are going to have to hit up Des Moines,
to
I
Salt
guess.
Lake City. So we're going to need some comic shops to be our base of operations as we stop in the middle of the United States.
But there's no reason why we couldn't schedule something in like Omaha or Des Moines at a public speaking venue, co-sponsored with a comic shop, and do, we could figure it out. We'll figure it out.
Absolutely. So it's time for my next goal for the year coming up. And here's something I kind of started talking about at the beginning of the show that I'm going to talk about a little bit more. My goal for 2024 is to use non-social media methods to grow my Patreon.
Non-social media methods to grow my Patreon. Okay, yep, keep going.
So here's what I'm talking about. I think last episode or a couple episodes ago, I kind of shared with you a little bit that in the first part of 2023, my Patreon dropped a total of $1,000 a month. I was down significantly. And the bad thing about it is it snuck up on me a couple $100 at a time.
Sure.
To the point where all of a sudden I was like, hey, these bills are between that and, of course, inflation and cost of living stuff going up.
And having to buy all those new shirts to accept awards in. I mean, it was an expensive year for Brad Geiger.
Not for nothing, but renting a damn tuxedo. It's
I was joking, but that's amazing. That's one of the costs. Yes. All right.
But no, it was like, so I and again, why that happened, I've got a number of theories. It's hard to really say. Part of it, I think, was an effect of Twitter getting very soft and not getting the same return on investment from Twitter. Mm-hmm. I think that was part of it. Mm-hmm. A part of it was also I made some changes in how I administered Patreon and didn't change my Patreon outgoing messaging that I'd been doing for years and years, almost like a reflex. And it wasn't until later I'm like, oh, geez, I changed the charge up front, but I was still doing the brunt of my promotion at the end of the month. So I was sending, and I hadn't, at that point, I hadn't switched over to subscription pricing yet. Because I think it wasn't available, or I was still trying to get my head around it one way or another. It was, I was sending a whole bunch of people to my Patreon at the end of the month, and they realized that they were going to get double billed, and they hopped, right? Mm-hmm. And so once I got all that straightened out and got charge up front with subscription billing, things started to equal out. But I still had to fight my way back up to where I was at the end of 2022, beginning of 2023. I can happily report to you that with this past month, I got there. It took me all year, but I got back to where I was in January of this year, which has been
but
not
also,
for nothing.
That speaks to the power of patience and persistence. that changes and things like that don't happen overnight. You have to stick with it slowly, consistently. Yeah. And apply your best patience and persistence to a problem like that. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and I had to think outside the box because what I was seeing was that I wasn't getting the same return on Twitter, specifically Twitter. So I had to start thinking outside of the box. So I had to start doing more and more of a non-social media outreach. Okay, like I've been kind of talking about for a long time. I started kind of doubling down on some of the stuff that I've been saying for a long time. The number one on this has been Patreon content exchanges. In other words, and if you think about it, a Patreon content exchange isn't that different from the old web ring concept, where it's kind of cross promotion. I've got this group of people, you've got that group of people. We're going to cross promote, and everybody is going to improve as a result. The Patreon content exchange is the number one reason that I was able to get back up to where I had to listen to this.
I will listen.
Listen to this. If you remember, I always used to say that the Evilink website was a certain percentage of new Patreon backers, right? When they come, I give them a one-question survey. How did you find out about me? And if you remember, it was always 70-some%. Above 70% was the number of people that came from the Evilink website. As of today, and this is cumulative, by the way, so it's not just this year's statistics, which is something that's important too. As of today, that number is now 65.9. Do you want to know what my number two answer is when I send that question out?
I sure do.
Arrow? It is a result of a Patreon contest exchange with another Not Safe for Work creator.
Really?
That is now 4.7% of respondents. Again, cumulatively, going back to when I first started doing this
Gosh darn it.
survey.
Yeah, no, this is good. This is good on you.
The next closest one is Twitter with 2.7%, and then it just goes down from there. Okay. And I do have to say, if I'm being honest, Instagram has more responses at 2.2% than I thought that I would ever get from Instagram. So it's from somebody that's dumped on Instagram for a long time. I got to be fair and say that Instagram gave me a lot more than I thought I'd see there. But 4.7% from that Patreon content exchange. So what am I doing? Well, I'm going to be doing, it's like pulling teeth, because every time I reach out to somebody, they think I'm working some kind of an angle, trying to get their Patreon backers or something. So the first thing I'm doing, and it might be happening like by the time this show hits the air, there's somebody that does a podcast. I was telling you about it before on Twitter Spaces that reaches a lot of Not Safe for Work creators.
Right.
I've already reached out. I'm going to show up on the show, and you'd better believe that that's going to be the first thing I'm talking about, is the importance for us to do content exchanges, because social media isn't working anymore. So we got to start thinking outside the box. We got to start taking matters into our own hands. My big goal, this may be my number one goal, is to be a vocal advocate for Patreon content exchanges, exclusive content exchanges, because it's the one thing that brought me back this year. It wasn't social media. It wasn't doing a special offer. It wasn't any of that stuff. It was exclusive content exchanges. And I got to get people to understand that. I've got to get them to understand that it's crucial that we all do this. We're going back. It's, like I said, not that different from a web ring. We got to go back. The old ways are coming back. And, we're going to have to, and so I'm doing that. And then just something else that I've done, because I think I'm good at it. I've been doing a lot more podcast appearances. I've been doing a lot more that I wouldn't have done in the past. I maybe wouldn't have made time for it. I'm doing a lot more where I'm talking about my work,
really,
and doing a lot more of that. And my sense, although I don't have the solid analytics on that, I think that my sense is that has done a lot. And again, I'm veering towards podcasts that I can see a significant Venn diagram overlap in what the crowd that they're reaching and the crowd that I'm reaching. And that means not only comics podcasts, but other podcasts. For the love of God, we got to stop thinking just in comics. We got to think bigger. What are the other communities that I can be talking to? Right. So I'm doing a lot more podcasts, and my hope is that I can keep that Patreon to that level that I kind of need it to be, so that all these other things that I'm talking about can fall into place. Because one of the not for nothing, a big reason I wasn't able to do Kickstarters this year too. Wasn't only because I was running all over accepting awards. As you know, it was just bound to happen to me. But that was a joke, by the way.
Oh my God!
I can tell that I've been filibustering. You just glazed over. You just, is he still talking? Holy Christ!
The grocery list was expanding in my head.
I swear I'll let you talk again soon. But the other reason I wasn't able to do it is because I was scrambling so hard on Patreon, I couldn't give up time to work on anything else. Yeah. I had to make sure. You were saying a couple episodes, do you really need to do those desktop wallpapers? Doesn't matter. This is not the time to stop doing anything. This is time to work twice as hard because I may not have anything, but I can work twice as hard as the next guy and make things happen. So that's my goal, is to use non-social media, outside of the box strategies to make my Patreon solid again in 2024?
First of all, I think this is such good advice that part of the reason why I was glazing was I was trying to remember the word intervention. I was blanking on it, and I wanted to talk about that. No, not for the reason you're thinking of, not because I wanted you to stop talking, but because I feel like every time you talk about content exchanges on Patreon, I feel like it's a personal intervention to me because it is so self-evidently a good idea. I'm not kidding about this. It is one of the smartest things that Brad has ever come up with. And every time he mentions it, I'm like, shit, he's right. I gotta start doing that. And so to everyone else listening, I co-sign this in the strongest possible way. I have done it maybe 4 times in my Patreon career over the last 9 years. And every time it worked like gangbusters. I do not know why I don't do it more. Probably because it's legwork and it involves emailing. But anyway, it's fine. But Brad is so on the nose here that genuinely, I see this as an intervention every time you mention it because it is so great advice, and I take it personally that I've been too stupid to actualize it. So I was not listening. I was trying to remember the word intervention, and I thank you for that, sharing that goal, because it's one that I should add to my list for 2024.
Well, Dave, what is your next goal for 2024?
Okay, so this one, I know a lot of people are going to roll their eyes on because I've had such trouble with the launch with it. But for those that remember from previous shows, at the NCS Rubin weekend, Brent Bartram, who is one of the heads over at Andrews McMeel Universal, Andrews McMeel Publishing, was sharing about getting our ebooks onto the Amazon Kindle system, and specifically under the Amazon Kindle Unlimited system, not because it pays well, it pays like 0.0005 per page, but because you make it up on volume. It is one of those passive incomes that once you get it working, it's bringing in $1,000 to $5,000 in passive income, especially if you have, like I do, a library of 15 to 18 ebooks that you could put up there, right? So previous shows, you know that it has been a hassle and a half to get this thing going. There's been all sorts of algorithmic bots that have limited me and blocked me and stopped me and done this and that. But my continuing goal for 2024 is to get all my Drive books up there and get all my Sheldon books up there and just get them working for me, because as annoying as it is to start, I really do have a goal with this, to have this be another leg under the table, as Brad and I always talk about. And let me explain why, because this is important. As Brad was saying with social media, with his very excellent point about why you have to find alternate ways to bring in new readers with content exchanges, to me, Amazon Kindle Unlimited does 2 things. One is it potentially has a really passive income stream where I genuinely do nothing, and $1,000 to a couple $1,000 comes in every year for people reading on Unlimited, right? That's the ideal goal. But then the second thing is, if you think about it, they're getting recommended reads of, hey, if you like this, you'll like this. Hey, if you read this before, you might want to try this. That's free advertising in a sense, that I might get in front of 10,000 people, of which 500 of those 10,000 might seek me out further, of which 100 might stick with me, of which 10 might be new Kickstarter backers, all passively, keep in mind. Once I get that working, it's working for me passively to bring in new people. So for me, it's if, and that's a very big if I can get this working, and if Amazon stops being a D-bag about it, I can have this working for me passively with no further expenditures of effort on my part once they're up, and it's bringing in income, and maybe it's bringing in new readers. So that's my second, my goal with Kindle in 2024. I don't say that it's definitely going to work that. In fact, it's likely not to. But the thing is, in this business, you always have to have at least one new thing you're trying every year to put a new leg under the table, because some old one, like Patreon 3 years from now, might get pulled out from under the table. And so Brad's planning for it, I'm planning for it, and we're working towards adding new legs under the table.
Absolutely. I've got a couple things I want to add to that because I was able to get my books up, and I didn't have some of the same problems you had in November. And there's a couple things I want to give you a heads up about. Number one, when you have a book on KDP, you have in your dashboard something they
Kindle
call
Direct Publishing, by the way, KDP.
Yeah.
Sorry.
They have something called a royalty estimator.
Oh, okay. Sure.
And so all like a dope, all through the month, I'm looking at my royalty estimator. And and I'm actually getting giddy over pennies, right? Because it goes, a couple more cents today. It went up to $12, then $13, then $13.50. Long story short, by the end of the month, I was at $33.58 on my royalty estimator. Right. They send the payment out. I look in my bank account, $3.59.
What?
The royalty estimator was off by a factor of like 10. I don't know what they were estimating, but the actual amount of money that came in was $3.59. Now, I've got
Could that be from the month prior? Do you know what I mean? Like, 'cause sometimes Amazon is late in their payments in the sense of a 30-day net payment or kind of thing?
It could be. I don't know that I had anything up 30 days prior. So like that's actually not a bad, and by the way, trying to find an answer on anything involved with Amazon is impossible. I would sit here and tell you that, oh geez, I should look that up, but I know it's going to be a frustrating experience. So why fucking bother? So maybe, but I can tell you this, I'm not looking at it as much of a leg under the table, but I told you that so I could tell you this. Along with that survey that I do for new Patreon backers, I've already started to see a couple of, and this is the first time I've seen this, couple of people who said they found out about my Patreon through an e-comic or an e-book.
Really?
Which is significant, right? So that
Interesting.
I've got to, I could isolate it so that I think I know the right person to ask. And I am going to drop that new patron a note and say, hey, if you don't mind me asking, was it KDP by any chance? Or maybe it was Drive-Thru Comics or something else. But what I am going to tell you is, as a first chance I get, I'm going to re-update all of my existing e-comics and put a little promo page at the end that says, hey, if you like this, here's what the rest of the stuff I'm doing. And that's going to be a definitely a part of my outgoing e-comics from here on. And there'll be a little page at the end saying, basically a promo page. If that turns some of those people into Patreon backers, then KDP turns into something very, an exercise very similar to Twitter or what social media used to be, where I'm doing the effort, I'm putting the content out there, not getting a lot of money, but I can use that as a way to bring new Patreon backers in. And so that's been my experience with all of 1 month under my belt.
And so I should, before we move on to our next goals, I want to put a huge caveat on this, that even though Kindle and Kindle Direct Publishing is one of my personal goals for 2024, not 50%, not 75%, I 100% don't recommend that you do this until I have cut my teeth on this and can give you the report. Let me be the guinea pig, because I very strongly suspect that this could be a burning Greek ship in port attacking the Aegeans. I don't know, where am I going with a reference to Greek?
Why are you?
Why was I thinking about Greek warfare in the sea? Why did that come up? That was... Well, you've just witnessed a stroke in real time, everyone. That was great. I'm going back for my CT scan.
As Pericles said to the Ephesians, what's that smell?
Holy hell. Why was I trying to refer to Greek warfare? Anyway, okay, so let me be the guinea pig, and because I very strongly suspect that this could all go south. So I'm not recommending it. I'm not suggesting you try it out. Let me be the one to dip a toe into the water, see if it's even workable. And then I promise you, I will report back. Brad, what is your next goal for 2024?
My final goal for 2024 is something I tipped my hand to at the beginning of the show. I am going to put on my list to start prepping my website for a potential pivot in case I need to move away from Patreon quickly.
Really?
Again, yeah. Listen, here's the deal. The time to do it is now, not when you're caught flat-footed.
That's very true, because it's always a long lead time to do something like this. Yeah.
And I'm not going to throw this. I'm not going to throw the switch yet. But I am going to start saying, okay, if this were to happen, now that I'm nice and calm here in my studio.
Sure.
You'd never know it, but I am. But here I am. I've got time. I've got clear thinking. This is the time for me to say, okay, what if this happened? You got to do this, and this. Let's start putting that stuff into position. And to be honest with you, that was the whole idea of having an EvilInk After Dark sub-site on the EvilInk website. Mm-hmm. That was all part of that. But I've got that. And now the question is, does that need to be improved? Is that working right? And if you needed to switch over to something, what would that entail? And the time to start thinking about those issues is now. So my goal is to start working on those issues and getting a game plan if I need it.
Yeah. Okay, I love this idea. I think this is very smart planning. If you hear from both Brad and I in some of our 2024 goals, we're basically planning for potentials. You know, these are not like firm, like if I do A, then B will be the result. A lot of these are, listen, I've built something special with this career. I don't want it to fall apart. So let's plan for ways that can forestall disaster. Like when the Aegeans would sail into port using some of the weapons that they had, quick fire, that kind of thing. So Brad, anyway, I'm gonna drill that to the ground. So one question I have for you, is there a way, Brad, for you, because you know, the Patreon API unlocks all sorts of aspects of the EvilInk site. Is there a way, and I actually don't know if this is the case, is there a way to have a second API that could unlock the very same website you have right now, but using a different key, basically? Like if you had Buy Me a Coffee or whatever those other dumb sites that are not Patreon, could they unlock the aspects of EvilInk? Could you have two APIs running at once?
The answer to that question is I don't know, but it's definitely one of the things that I'm going to try to find out because that would be kind of the optimal way to have something that I can already start testing in real time. Yeah. So that if I do need to, I can just say, okay, here's where we are, and you know, also it's a good time for me to start just doing things like making sure that I've got a list of Patreon backers that I can reach out to at some point in case I got to say, hey, we're getting disconnected. Here's the next thing to do if you want to stay in touch, you know? So building that is going to be important too. So the answer is, I don't know, but it's definitely worth looking into.
All right, well, I will jump into my final goal for 2024, and maybe this could be for both of us. I don't know. For the 6 years that we have done ComicLab, I've never really made goals per se for the podcast. It's always been something that I desperately enjoy doing. I love firing up the mic and talking with my friend Brad Guigar. It's honestly one of my favorite things that I do, to talk and laugh with Brad Guigar about the art form that we love and how to best do it and how to make a living from it. It's one of my favorite things in the world. But for 2024, after 6 years of doing the podcast, I kind of want to lean into making this a bigger and bigger chunk of our financial year. And it's gone from being beer and pizza money to maybe, I don't know, I see other podcasts with like 40,000 patrons and I'm like, what are we doing wrong? What can we do different? So I genuinely, this might sound stupid, but I would love to make it a goal for us to get to 500 patrons for ComicLab. I think that'd be a fun little marker to get to, 500 folks back in the show.
Well, and it's not impossible because it wasn't too long ago. I think just in our private conversations, I think about 2 years ago, we were like, wouldn't it be great to get to 400? It's like we had flirted with 400. We'd get 400 and then it'd be 380. We'd get to 400 and then it'd be 390. But then pretty soon we got to 410 and it would drop to 401 and then 420. And I think we're solid in the 400s now. Like we haven't dipped below 400 in an awful long time, to the extent that we can kind of plant our flag in the 400. Yeah, we're at 449 right now. All we're talking about is gaining 50 more Patreon backers and bringing them into our community, on an ongoing basis. I think it's doable. I think we can actually do that. I think part of it is we've got a niche kind of publication, right?
Sure.
We love that non-cartoonists listen to the show, but really our meat and potatoes is people who are doing comics, right? So part of it is that we've got to reach out to those people who have no idea that we're here, but do comics, right?
Right.
That's going to be a big part of it. And another part is I think we got to just talk about it more, because this is the first time we've mentioned our Patreon numbers on the show, probably in 6 years.
I don't think in 6 years we've ever mentioned it. Yeah.
We talk about Patreon on the show. Hey, be a ComicLab backer, all this other stuff. But we've never really talked about numbers in that regard. And I think that's going to be part of it too. It's just kind of letting people know, hey, this is something that we want to happen. And so, because listen, every time, and I see it happen a lot. And believe me, I'm so grateful when it does. Somebody will be out there talking about comics, and one of our backers will come in and say, well, listen, Brad and Dave talk about this concept, or Brad and Dave say this, or you should listen to ComicLab because they talk about these things all the time. Right. When we get that personal endorsement from practicing working cartoonists all up and down the amateur pro-am pro level, there's nothing better than that.
It's great. It is great.
And I think we just need to start talking about that more. Is just saying, hey, we love it when you do that, and keep doing it, because hitting 500 is very doable for this year.
I don't know. So psychologically, that seems like that would be a fun thing to hit.
Yeah.
And the nice thing is, because at this point, we're not a fly-by-night podcast. It's 6 years. Yeah. And 300 bonus shows that we recorded that the public has not heard. They're only for patrons. Called ProTips that we do, which also contains Writer's Room. And honestly, this is something that I would want to do for the next 6, 16, 26 years. I've loved doing the show. And so I think part of that is sort of building a foundation where we can continue to do it for decades to come.
Yeah, I know how we can celebrate hitting 500.
How's that?
I think we hit 500. There's only one way to celebrate, and that's with another round of Drunker ComicLab.
That's what we do. We tell everybody we get to 500, and we'll do another twofer of ComicLab.
Because I don't know whether you're keeping track of the response to those two shows. It is off the hook. People are nuts about it. I guess we're very interesting when we're liquored up.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I will happily do it. That was one of the funniest two shows we've ever recorded. So yes, let's make that our commitment. You help us get to 500 patrons over in ComicLab, and you will get those two exclusive Drunk and Drunker ComicLabs coming up in 2024. Gosh, God willing, when we get to those 500 patrons, that'll be great.
Let's hope that they never get tired of hearing us drunk, because I am not ready to start doing meth.
Oh God, that's a terrible angle.
And on that note, I guess I'm just going to tell you that you've been listening to ComicLab. No transition. You don't get a transition today. No transition after that.
Look, it's been a long 2023, everybody. Listen.
That's it. You've been listening to ComicLab, the show about maybe that'll be my thing for 2024. No transition. I'll just shoot right into it. Just interrupt you in the middle of a sentence.
It's like my uncle leaving a house. He just walks out. All right, bye.
Yeah. Like you say a sentence, I'll just cut you off midway through. Just any sentence.
Well, I have to tell you, the transmission on the car was...
You've been listening to ComicLab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been my warm and delightful friend, Brad Guigar, the editor of WebcomicsHandbook, the winner of a huge award in 2023 and more to come in 2024. He's also the creator of Evil Inc. at evilcomic.com.
And my good friend Dave Kellett, the co-director of the comics documentary Stripped and the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com, and Drive, coming up with book number 4 in 2024. Nice. At drivecomic.com.
And the ComicLab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode was edited by the ever wonderful Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love Comic Lab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and you may hear your review featured on a future episode along those lines. Thank you to everybody that posted their Spotify wrapped images that showed that Comic Lab was their #1 podcast. We had some people like well within the top 10% of listeners that listened to an ungodly amount of minutes of our voices, and that kind of stuff. I can't tell you how much we're grateful for it, because stuff like that is what's going to get us to 500 in the next year. Absolutely. There were some folks that posted their Spotify, and it was like 70 hours, 80 hours of Comic Lab that they had listened to in 2023. And that's fantastic. I love that kind of stuff. That warms my heart. And so I will say Comic Lab is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So I will go ahead and say that twice. Patreon.com/let's get to 500 patrons. So, Brad, the Battle of Salamis was a naval battle fought in 480 BC, and this was an alliance of Greek city-states under Themistocles, and the Persian Empire was under Xerxes, as you remember. So you've been listening to Comic Lab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.